Now, the Conservative Party in Europe is certainly not the Conservative Party that you served with under Margaret Thatcher.
No.
And you've gone and you've joined UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party.
Yes.
Do you see them as your new alternative for a small c conservatism in England?
Well, the sad truth is that the Conservative Party is no longer in a recognisable sense conservative in the way that, say, Margaret Thatcher would have understood it. It has very radically changed. It's now become just another version of socialism with, at the moment, just to give you one example, the Conservative government is actively pursuing a case in, I forget which of the various European courts that now, in truth, govern us, to obtain the right to tell Christians that they may not wear the cross about their person visibly when they are at work. Now, what on earth is a Conservative government doing that for when people are going around in hijabs and burqas and the zucchetto that the Jews wear, and all sorts of religious dresses are worn, and the sophisticated argument that is being used by the supposedly Conservative government in justification for this monstrosity is that the Christian religion does not require you to wear the cross, and therefore you mustn't.
Now, your Catholicism seems to go with you wherever you go. Do you find it a necessary component of your research in your daily life when you're talking about climate change, when you're talking about mathematics? Is that incorporated into all of that intellectual pursuits, your Catholicism?
Well, very much so, because there's a moral purpose to all of this. I mean, why should I bother to go around the world being vilified hither and yon by the left? You know, and they're very cruel about it and very persistent about it.
You feel yourself you have a mission or a crusade?
No, good heavens, no. But why should I bother if there were not some moral justification for what I'm trying to do? No, it isn't a crusade. If people ask me to come and give a talk, I will come and give a talk. I don't ring up and say, right, you need me to come and talk at your event or your university. I don't have a vast team of PR advisors who fix all this. It all happens because people get in touch and they say, oh, we've seen your stuff on the web or whatever, and we would like to, come to our school, come to our university, come to our legislative assembly, and we'd like to hear what your point of view is. And I do that because I'm asked to do it. But why would I bother to do it unless I thought that in doing that I was doing some good? I'm not here to argue a political point of view. The question whether or not we're faced with a dangerous global warming, and whether or not, even if we were, it is cost effective to try and do anything about it, these are not questions which really ought to be political questions at all. They're matters of right and wrong. They're matters of objective truth and untruth. But if we take decisions on the basis that yes, there's dangerous warming when there isn't, or yes, we should spend endless amounts of money trying to make this warming go away, when however much money you spend, you won't be able to make very much of it go away anyway. This could lead to the bankruptcy in direct financial terms of many parts of the West if we go on like this. So to have a voice of reason saying, well, look, hang on a moment, you need to do the sums before you take the decisions. This seems to me to be a necessary corrective to the rather common approach these days of deciding things via a party line rather than by the use of reason. Because if we lose the use of reason, we lose that central power of the soul, which chiefly differentiates us from the rest of the visible creation and chiefly gives us our likeness to our Creator. We must not lose our very humanity, which is best marked out by the fact that we, as far as we can see more than any other critters, can exercise the faculty of reason. If we throw that away, we're not just throwing out the baby with the bathwater, we're throwing the whole of humanity out at the same time.
Keeping with the theme of religion, what do you think of political Islam or Islam itself? And certainly you will not see people of that particular faith, at least I'm not familiar with any, who are as reasonable, if you want to put it that way, coming out and saying that this is the truth in science, that we must follow this, or you must reject this nonsense. Do you find political Islam perhaps a dangerous threat to liberal democracies?
If we go back to the 10th century, at that time, Islam made a very curious intellectual mistake with catastrophic consequences in our own time. They decided to abandon ijtihad. Now, ijtihad was the process of exegesis by which the Quran and the various texts associated with it, because it's not just the Quran, there's a lot of other writings,
Hadiths, etc.,
were adapted, as it were, or the message was applied, not so much changing the text, but applying the message in a way that was relevant for the different conditions of each succeeding generation. This is a necessary and continuous process. Christian theology has to do it too, of course. And they stopped doing it. They decided that every question that could possibly arise in the future of humanity had already been answered by the scholars of old, and nothing more needed to be done. Now, with that shutting down of the religious exegesis, the religious thinking and exposition of the teachings and their application to modern circumstances, gradually came a collapse in what had been the remarkable intellectual ferment by which it was Islam that studied science. Indeed, I have a particular reason to be grateful to the scholars of Islam in those days, because without them, the classical texts that I studied would have been lost to humanity altogether. It was they who preserved them in the library at Cordoba. And so when the Christians invaded and kicked out the Moors, they found these treasures, which had been lost to Christendom. And without them, there would have been no Renaissance, there would have been no classical education. There would have been none of the logic and all the other wonders that we get from the classical world. It would all have been lost.
But you don't see that kind of aspect of Islam being taught today. For example,
this is the sadness.
In Tower Hamlets, you're not going to find that, are you?
Once ijtihad had gone, and once the Christians who had lived really in, I won't say a harmonious coexistence, but really quite a successful one in southern Spain, decided that they would assert themselves and kick out the Moors, that really was the last straw, if you like, and we were partly to blame. So I'm always rather cautious about saying, well, these people are all terrible, because there's a long history to get us where we are, and we need to understand that. So my view is that it is a shame that Islam now has reverted to the Wahhabist or absolutist version of itself, which is rather extreme. And this is largely the influence of the oil wealth of Saudi Arabia, which follows the Wahhabist presentation of Islam and has been quite sedulous in quietly spreading it through money all over the world, including in the United Kingdom. But I think also when we as Christians approach Islam, we too have to again acknowledge that in the Crusades we did not behave as our Lord and Master told us that we should, and we behaved brutally, and sometimes very brutally, wiping out men, women and children wherever we found them if they were not Christians. Now that is not what the good book says we should do, and these wounds that we created are still festering in the breast of Islam, and I can understand that. Now that doesn't mean therefore we must cave in to the extremist presentation of Islam at all, but it does mean that if we are to engage with them, we must know the history and be sensitive to it, so that we can lead them once again to restore ijtihad, and to restore also the love of scholarship, which was so very evident in the early centuries of Islam. For instance, the scientific method itself was given to us first by Abu Ali ibn al-Hasan ibn al-Husayn ibn al-Husayn ibn al-Haytham. He was as proud of his lineage as I am of mine. And he was an astronomer and mathematician and philosopher of science in 11th century Iraq, and wrote in ancient Farsi. And you'll see him celebrated on Iraqi banknotes to this day. And it was he who said that the seeker after truth What a wonderful name for a scientist, the seeker after truth. Try telling that to some of the people that I'll be meeting in California shortly. The seeker after truth does not put his faith in any mere consensus, however broad, however venerable. Instead, he subjects what he has learnt of it to his own hard-won scientific knowledge and to scrutiny, experiment, investigation, inquiry, inspection, and checking and checking and checking again. The road to the truth, said Al-Haytham, is long and hard, but that is the road that we must follow. Now, what more Christian sentiment could there be than that? What more noble sentiment for any scientist, or indeed for anyone, could there be than that? And it reminds me very much of what our blessed Lord said when Pontius Pilate had said to him, "Quid est veritas?" What is the truth? And our blessed Lord had provoked this question by saying, that I, how did it go? For this was I born, that's right. Unto this came I into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. So you can see that in early Islam, as in Christianity even to this day, the search for the truth, whether it be the truth of religion, which is found through faith and through theologians meditating upon the faith that we're given, or whether through science, which is done through reason and through investigation, exactly as Al-Haytham described, these are approaches which should unite true Islam and true Christianity. And it's on that I would like to build. I don't think we can continue purely to take an antagonistic and confrontational approach to Islam. I don't think we should therefore curl up and let them walk all over us. I mean, there is a balance always to be struck in these things. But I think it is for us, as the Christians, whose duty, above all else, is agapesis, diliges, thou shalt love. In Latin and in Greek it's one word, in English it's three. But thou shalt love, and that is the whole of the law. We have to love them too, even if they do not love us. Because if we go on loving them, eventually it changes them. And it doesn't change us in a bad way if we try. Now that may sound unduly wet. Does this mean we let our guard down and allow the bombers to come in and blow up our cities? We've had that in London. So no, we have to keep our guard up. We have to maintain strong intelligence forces. We have to maintain, I think, a more satisfactory immigration system that says that no, they can't come here quite as freely as they have unless and until we are sure that they are willing to fit in to our culture. It doesn't mean extinguishing theirs, but it does mean that they must not be insisting, for instance, that their Sharia law should be applied in our country. I think there are limits, and we must bring them to understand that in the spirit of live and let live, a balance must be struck. That's what we should look for. We shouldn't be looking to fight them. We should be looking to accommodate them, but without selling our souls in the process.
Lord Christopher Monckton, thank you very much.
And thank you.
And that was Lord Christopher Monckton, who I interviewed here in London on Tuesday. Next week, Bob Metz and I will continue our discussion of Christopher Monckton and will air exclusive audio from his luncheon with supporters at the International Free Press Society, his talk at the annual Nuremberg Lecture here at UWO, and the solution to the sphere and the cylinder puzzle he challenged us with last week. So, until then, you know what to do. Stay right, think right, and be right back here next week.
Fade into color, and color into black and white. Under the bedclothes,
A lot of people don't like flying on airplanes, but I actually don't mind it. Last time I was on a plane, I had 3 seats all to myself. 9A, 14B, and 21F.